Hi everyone, I'm Miranda and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today I wanted to share some more comforting reads. I often turn to children's books when I just want a light, easy comfort read, and I know a lot of other adults do that too. I love the writer and podcaster Gretchen Rubin, who does the Happier podcast, and she talks a lot about how she turns to children's books when she wants to de-stress, and she actually started children's books, book clubs for adults. And I loved that idea, and I'm just like her in that I turn to children's literature when I'm a bit stressed and when I need some comfort. So I thought I would share some of my favourite children's books with you all today. First up, I want to talk about Elizabeth Goudge. I know a lot of people read The Little White Horse in their childhood. I did. I absolutely adored it when I was little, and it is still one of my very favourite books. If you haven't read it, please do. It's such a children's classic, and it really is a gorgeous, heartwarming tale. I love Elizabeth Goudge's writing. She wrote a lot of adult books that are great comfort reads too, but I really wanted to highlight another of her children's books today, and that's called Linnets and Valerians by Elizabeth Goudge. It was also published as The Runaways, so you might be able to find it as The Runaways if you have trouble finding Linnets and Valerians. I wanted to talk about this one today because I know a lot of people know about The Little White Horse, but not so many people know about Linnets and Valerians. And this is such a charming tale. It was one of my very favourites when I was little too. I think it really started me on my love for nature. It's about siblings who go and they stay in the countryside in Dartmoor with their rather horrible grandmother, who's very strict, and they decide to run away from the house, but they actually encounter their uncle, Uncle Ambrose, who is much nicer and a much better suited person to be with children, really, and they have adventures rambling all over his big mansion in the countryside and his garden, and they meet his gardener Ezra, who talks to bees. He's a beekeeper and he teaches the children to really respect bees, and I remember being so fascinated by that when I was young, and it made me really interested in bees even at that age, and that was really because of this book. There's always a lot of magic mixed in with reality with Elizabeth Goudge's writing. You get that in The Little White Horse, and that's in this book too. The village that the children are nearby has had a sort of spell cast on it, and a family, the Valerians, have gone missing. So the children have to try and find the missing Valerians. And so it's a great sort of adventure story as well, but it's just got all the sort of trademark classic Elizabeth Goudge loveliness to it. It's so well written, and ultimately it's a really comforting, cozy read. So I highly recommend this one. And then next is the Betsy-Tacy books by Maud Hart Lovelace. I adore these books. I still reread them really often, especially the ones where Betsy and her friends Tacy and Tib are a little bit older. This is a lovely series. It starts when the girls are really quite little, and then it takes the reader all the way up to when they're all married. So it's such a lovely series, especially for young girls to read. The books are set in Minnesota, in a small town in Minnesota, at the sort of in the early 20th century. They go up until about World War I. And they're about friendship I love Betsy. She's one of my favourite literary heroines ever. She's desperate to become a writer. She loves reading and writing. She's also quite a flawed heroine in some ways. She makes a lot of mistakes, and she really has to learn from her mistakes through the book. Maud Hart Lovelace wrote a lot of herself into Betsy, so I think that's partly why she's just such a real character, and I empathised with her so much when I was young. But she's also a really friendly character. She always makes a sort of gang, a group of friends who come round to her house, and the family always serve them food, and she's a very sociable person, which was something I always liked about her. But these are just lovely books about female friendship too, and they're just such feel-good reads. I can't recommend these enough. If you know the film You've Got Mail, Meg Ryan recommends these books as her character in the film, and that made me really excited when I was young, the first time I saw You've Got Mail. But that made me think that obviously Nora Ephron was a big fan of Betsy-Tacy too. So yeah, if you haven't read these, please do. They're so charming. And then another classic children's book, Tom's Midnight Garden by Philippa Pearce. I think this book is especially relevant to read right now because it's about Tom being in quarantine because his brother has measles. So he's been sent away to stay with his uncle and aunt, and he's extremely bored, having no one to play with. But one night when he falls asleep, he suddenly realises that the clock has struck 13. And he gets up and goes downstairs and discovers this fantastic garden because his aunt and uncle are living in a flat in a house that used to be a big mansion, but there's no longer a proper garden there anymore. So Tom thinks that he's dreaming about this garden, but in fact the garden seems incredibly real to him, and he meets a young girl called Hattie, who is the only person who can see him in this sort of alternate reality. And he becomes very good friends with Hattie. This is just such a magical, it's an enchanting book. Again, I think looking back at these books, I realise why I love nature writing so much now. I think it's books like this that really got me started on a love for nature and nature writing in particular. The descriptions of the garden are really gorgeous in this book. But it's a children's classic for a reason, and it stands up so well being read as an adult too, and it's just such a comforting read. The ending is just so touching in this book. So yes, a lovely cozy comfort read here as well. And then, of course, Little Women. I don't need to say much about this because I know this is a much loved classic for so many people. I adored the recent film, and that made me want to read Little Women again. Last summer I also went to see Orchard House, Louisa May Alcott's house, which was such a special experience to sort of see the desk where she sat and wrote. And this book, I mean, I read it when I was young. I think maybe actually my mum might have read this to me when I was really young. I think this was one I didn't read myself first. I think my mum read it first, and then when I was a bit older, I read it. But it has special memories for me because of that too, because she really shared this book with me and her love for it. And yes, it's just such a wonderful, comforting read. So I'm sure I'll be turning to Little Women at this time. Then another of my very favourite children's book writers is Eva Ibbotson. She wrote a book I adored when I was young called The Secret of Platform 13, and I so recommend that book for young readers. J.K. Rowling referenced The Secret of Platform 13 as a book that inspired her when she was writing Harry Potter. And I think you can really see that inspiration in that book. So I do recommend The Secret of Platform 13. That's such a great read. But I also love Eva Ibbotson's YA novels, and these tend to be the books that I reread a lot as an adult still. And one of my very favourites is The Morning Gift. And this is about a young woman who has to flee Vienna with her family before World War II breaks out, and they have some difficulty in leaving Austria. And one of the ways that she really manages to get out is a friend of the family who's British agrees to a sort of marriage of convenience. So he marries her so that she can become British and leave the country and go to England. But of course the sort of romance develops between them anyway. But it sounds a bit of a silly story, but it's actually really good. And Eva Ibbotson's heroines are always so gutsy. They always have such great personalities. They're always animal lovers as well, which I am, so I think that especially spoke to me when I was young. But honestly, they stand up really well reading as an adult too. So please do look up Eva Ibbotson. She wrote quite a few books, YA books. You can kind of see them. You can see them on the back here. And they have been republished with really gorgeous covers. So yes, I recommend them. Okay, next, a real comfort read again for me is The Wind in the Willows. I tend to like to read this book in the springtime anyway, because I always feel for Mole when he just, you know, says like drat spring cleaning or whatever. I know just how he feels and he wants to go off and have an adventure instead. And I love the adventures that Ratty and Mole get up to, and Toad, of course, as well. But the nature writing again in this book is actually fantastic. And yeah, this will always be a real comfort read for me. So The Wind in the Willows, such a classic and a wonderful, comforting read. Then I know obviously that a lot of people love Anne of Green Gables. I do too, but I wanted to recommend something a little bit different in this video. And I absolutely adore the Emily trilogy by L.M. Montgomery, and I don't think it gets enough recognition. I mean, like I said, I love the Anne books, but honestly, if you haven't read the Emily books, please do. There are 3 in the series. There's Emily of New Moon is the first one, and then it's Emily Climbs, and then Emily's Quest. And I love them. Emily is so driven to become a writer. I actually think these are a lot more autobiographical in some ways, in terms of Ellen Montgomery putting a lot of herself and some of her personality into Emily. And Emily does actually become a writer too, which is something I find really inspiring about this series. But she shares a lot of similarities with Anne in that she's an orphan. She's looked after by a rather strict, although still loving guardian, and she has an amazing imagination. So if you like Anne, then you would love Emily too. And these are amongst some of my very favourite comfort reads too. I really want to reread this trilogy soon, actually, because it's just brilliant. I love Emily. I love these books. And then something really light, but in one of my recent videos, which I'll link up here, I talked about my love for school stories and boarding school fiction. Obviously, those are big comfort reads for me too, but because I did a whole video on that, I didn't want to mention them again in this video. However, I do want to talk about the Murder Most Unladylike series by Robin Stevens. This is a modern series of books for children, but they're set in the sort of 1930s in a boarding school. And 2 of the girls become really good friends, and they form a sort of detective society, and they end up solving a murder that happens. And there's a whole series of books now in the Murder Most Unladylike series, and they're just really fun. I think Robin Stevens is so clever with what she's done with this series. If you like Agatha Christie and if you like Enid Blyton, it's like those two things are sort of combined in her series. So they're really fun, and I really recommend them. I interviewed Robin Stevens on my podcast, Tea and Tattle, a couple of years ago, so I'll put a link to that interview in the show notes if you want to find out more about these books. But yeah, I've read these all as an adult, and they're really, really fun. I love them. And then Ballet Shoes, one of my very, very favourite books. I adored this when I was little, and it's still a book that I reread often and is really special to me. I realised I really loved it when I was young. I mean, partly because I wanted to be a ballerina myself. I did loads of ballet when I was little, but what I really admire as an adult too is that Noel Streatfeild really spoke about ambition for children, and none of these girls just wanted to grow up and get married, which was quite unusual for when this was written. And I love the fact that she actually gave them real ambition. They wanted to have careers, they wanted to have their name, as they say, written in the history books. And I think that that was wonderful what she did with this, and also that the three Fossil sisters all have such different personalities, but they're all really wonderful. And Petrova is, not the stereotypical sort of female child in this, and she really shows how Petrova struggles to learn things like ballet, and in the end she wants to be like an engineer and she wants to fly airplanes, and in the end she manages to realise her ambition as well. And I love that about the books too. So yes, Ballet Shoes will always be one of my absolute favourite reads, and it stands up to the test of time so well. Then if you love Ballet Shoes as well, I really want to recommend The Swish of the Curtain. This is the original edition that I got when I was a little. I can't remember how I first found out about these books when I was young, because this was first published, I think, in either the 1940s or the 1950s. It was first published December 1941. And it was written when Pamela Brown was only 14 years old. I think she started it when she was 14 and finished it when she was 15, which is truly remarkable because this is just such a brilliantly written book. It's about a group of friends who set up their own theatre company called the Blue Door Theatre Company. And what's so well done about this is it shows how the children really learn about theatre, not just about acting, but some of them, for instance, love making the costumes, and that becomes like their speciality. And then another child paints all of the backdrops, and then another realizes that he's an amazing comic actor in particular. So if you are interested in theatre, then these are such fun books. It actually is a whole series, and Pushkin Press recently republished them, so you can get all of them now, which is wonderful. It's the Pushkin Children's editions that they've done, and yes, I just so recommend these. And yet if you like Noel Streatfeild, then I'm sure you would love Pamela Brown, and they're just such entertaining reads even as an adult. So definitely look out for The Swish of the Curtain. But those are all of my recommendations, all of the children's books that I turn to when I'm in need of a bit of comfort. So I hope you enjoyed these recommendations. Let me know if any of these books are favourites of yours, or what children's books you like to read as an adult. If you do read children's books as an adult, I'd love to know what books are your favourites too. But please give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and you can subscribe to my channel by clicking my face that pops up on the screen. But I hope you are all well and doing as well as possible right now. Thanks so much for watching my video, and I'll be back again soon with another one. Bye!